Good afternoon, everybody. We are sorry for this short technical delay. I'm Ugo Tramballi, ISPI Senior Advisor and columnist with the Italian economic newspaper Il Sole 24 Ore, together with Margherita Stancati, Middle East correspondent with the Wall Street Journal. We have the pleasure to talk with Ayman Safadi, the Deputy Prime Minister and Minister of Foreign Affairs of the Hashemite Kingdom of Jordan, and a colleague, journalist also. Ahlan wa sahlan, Minister. What is the Jordan, first question immediately, as we try to be as fast as possible. What is the Jordan opinion of the Abraham Accords?
Good afternoon to you all first, and allow me first to express gratitude for the Italian Foreign Ministry and for the Italian Institute for International Political Studies for providing this opportunity. Sir, we are a country that has been invested in peace for decades. The achievements of a just and lasting peace has been a key priority, something for which the kingdom has devoted all its efforts to bring about. We're a country that signed a peace treaty with Israel about 26 years ago. And since then, we've tried everything we could to make sure that the peace treaty would enable an environment that would allow for progress towards the comprehensive peace that we believe is a necessity and a right forward. That said, I think the impact of the accords will depend really on how Israel reacts to that. And that is not just in relation to the Emirati and Bahraini Accords, but also in relation as well to the Jordanian peace treaty and the Egyptian peace treaty before. If Israel reacts to them as an incentive, as a motivator to go ahead in doing what is needed to achieve the last and comprehensive peace that we all seek, then it will really have an impact that all of us in the region would feel. The core issue, the core cause of conflict is the Palestinian-Israeli conflict. This is why the conflict started, and resolving it on basis that would address the legitimate rights of the Palestinian people on the basis of the two-state solution that would fulfill their right to freedom and independent statehood on their national land with occupied Jerusalem as their capital on the 1967 borders, to live in peace, harmony with Israel. Then we will have all contributed to the creation of a safer Middle East. So again, it really depends on how Israel reacts towards resolving the core issue, which is the Palestinian-Israeli conflict. And for that to happen, we need practical steps. We need to see an acknowledgement and a recognition of the right of the Palestinian people to live in freedom and dignity. We need to see a cessation of measures that are undermining the requirements for peace, such as the building and expansion of settlements, the demolition of houses, and many other measures that are creating an environment that is not conducive to sending the messages of hope that people in this part of the world desperately need.
Thank you, Minister. I have a follow-up question. For many years, the position of many Arab countries has been not to recognize Israel until the establishment of an independent Palestinian state. The Abraham Accords somehow changed that. It's not just the UAE and Bahrain. It's possible that the normalization process with the relations with Israel will expand beyond those two countries. Saudi Arabia is among the countries that could be considering normal diplomatic ties with Israel. My question for you is, do you think this would be a mistake, that speeding up too much with the relations between especially Gulf Arab countries and Israel could come at the cost of the Palestinians? In other words, are you worried about what the implications would be of these accords for the Palestinians and specifically for the establishment of a Palestinian state?
If I may just throw in some context here, since 2002, all Arab countries have put on the table the Arab Peace Initiative, which offered full normal ties with Israel within the context of a comprehensive peace that would end Israeli occupation of Palestinian and other Arab lands. So the issue of recognizing Israel and recognizing its right to exist, is something that embodied also in the Oslo Agreement and in the Palestinian position for decades. So the question was not really recognition or not. The question is, how do we move towards achieving the peace that is, again, as I said, a right for all peoples of the region? And how do we solve the conflict that has haunted the region and has deprived its people and countries from many, many opportunities to focus on other important issues, such as development and many other aspects. This is the question. Now, those treaties are part of the dynamic. Uh, in addition to the Jordanian peace treaty and the Egyptian peace treaty, all of us who have peace treaty with Israel, including our brethren in the Emirates and Bahrain, have made it very clear that there is no change in terms of what is required to achieve the peace that we want. The Emirati position, the Bahraini position, is consistent with the Jordanian position, Egyptian position, Saudi position, the Moroccan position, and the Palestinian position, that the path to resolving this conflict is the two-state solution on the basis of international law, in accordance with the Arab Peace Initiative, with a view, as I said, to establishing a sovereign Palestinian state on Palestinian national soil to live in peace and harmony with Israel. So normalization of ties is not alternative to solving the core conflict. It can be a motivation, it can be an incentive, but that is really going to depend on what Israel does going forward. Thus far, we have not seen a slowdown in settlements. On the contrary, we've seen an increase in settlement building and settlement activity. Israeli politicians have reacted in ways that would undermine the pillars of the peace process since it was launched in Madrid, which is the land for peace formula. It is not because Jordan, Egypt, Emirates, and Bahrain did not have a peace treaty with Israel that we have a conflict. It is because there is a conflict that those peace treaties did not materialize before, and it is once we solve that conflict and provide justice to the Palestinians and end the last existing occupation in the world today, that we will all move towards what we all want, which is a just, comprehensive, lasting peace that would unleash the potential of this region for addressing many of the other challenges that we all share in terms of development, education, water security, food security. And I think we're all facing the terrible consequences of the corona pandemic now, which once again shows how interdependent our collective security is and how interconnected our abilities to secure better futures for our people is as well. So that, I think, is something that we all need to keep our eyes on. The core conflict is the Palestinian-Israeli conflict, is the absence of Palestinian-Israeli peace, and that is where all our efforts need to be focused going forward. And that's something that the Kingdom has been working on for a long time, particularly in the past few years where we did not have any meaningful engagement. Our priority has been to bring the parties back to the table to ensure that we have effective, meaningful negotiations that would take us towards the two-state solution, because negotiations on the basis of the two-state solution, we believe, are the only path to the comprehensive peace that we want.
Thank you. Minister, do you think that Biden administration will make some significant changes of the American agenda in the region? The Oslo, the peace process made by Jared Kushner, every issue of the region?
Well, sir, the United States is a key player, and we've always held the position that without active U.S. engagement, we will not be able to get the traction that we want towards achieving that peace. The Biden administration has indicated some policy measures that we believe will help create an environment that is conducive to resumption of negotiations, and you can count on Jordan to do everything we possibly can to enable that positive environment that again would allow the parties to sit around the table and engage in meaningful negotiations. the president-elect and his administration has indicated in statements that they'll be looking at things like renewing aid to UNRWA, which is a must because UNRWA, as you all know right now, is facing tremendous financial difficulties that is making the lives of people who are already having very difficult lives much, much harder in terms of education, health services, and basic human needs as well. They've indicated commitment to the two-state solution. His Majesty the King was the first from the region to speak to President-elect Biden, and it was an excellent conversation. And in that conversation, President Biden reiterated the commitment of his administration to work with all of us towards achieving the comprehensive peace that we want.
Thank you, Minister. I'd like to ask you a little bit what you anticipate will be the biggest geopolitical issues in the Middle East going forward. There's lots going on in Syria, Iraq, Libya, and as the Abraham Accords remind us, also growing tension between particularly the Gulf countries and Iran. A key element of the Abraham Accords that binds Israel and Gulf countries is a shared opposition to Iran. I would like to ask you, how worried are you about growing tensions between the Arab world and Iran? And within this context, how much room is there for the Palestinian cause? Are you worried that with so much else going on, that will not be a priority for regional players and international players? And specifically, what can Jordan do to change that?
Thank you. The reality is that everything in the Middle East is interconnected. You don't talk about the Palestinian cause. The Palestinian cause, the failure to solve the Palestinian issue, the failure to bring about justice is something that every radical in the region has also used to propagate their own agenda. The Palestinian-Israeli peace is key to regional stability, and we do believe that there is recognition by all in the region and beyond of the centrality of this issue. So on the contrary, I think going forward, we're going to see more efforts to try and bring focus to this key issue in the region, and Jordan has and will continue to do everything it possibly can, as I said, to create political horizon towards a just resolution of the conflict. His Majesty the King has been extremely focused on this issue and has once and again warned against the consequences of the failure to end this conflict, because it has implications that will resonate in the region and beyond. We talk about the pandemic now, and the pandemic again has shown how much we need to work together, how important is our multilateral system, and how imperative it is for all of us to reinforce multilateralism as a mechanism for addressing our common challenges. So unfortunately, the list of challenges in the region is quite long, but I would say in addition to the Palestinian issue, we're going to have to look at the issue of terrorism. Terrorists remain a very potent threat. They thrive on despair, loss of hope, chaos, and conflicts. And we have a major battle with them, not just on the battlefield where they pose a threat to all of us, but also in the ideological field where we are doing everything we possibly can to show that terrorists have nothing to do with Islam and its values of peace and respect for the other, to show that everything they do is actually contrary to the values of Islam. And so that's one aspect of it. The other aspect is to try and resolve conflicts on which they prey. The Syrian issue is a tragedy that has been ongoing for over a decade now. It's about time that we have a clear approach as how do we move forward to solving that conflict, because it is a crisis that caused so much death and destruction and damage. It destabilized a key Arab state. Unfortunately, in the past few years, we have not seen a coherent strategy to solve the conflict. It was ad hoc approach to the problem. So I hope we will be able, together with our brothers and friends in the region and beyond, to work out a strategy that would enable us to solve the Syrian crisis, because not only will it bring back peace and stability, but would also be an important element in our collective war against terrorism, which targets all of us, by the way. Everyone who does not agree with their ideology of hate is a legitimate target for them, and that makes it more imperative for us to work together and coordinate our efforts to counter them. Some of the consequences of the Syrian crisis is the issue of refugees. The kingdom is home to about 1.3 million Syrian brothers who have been with us for a long while. 40% of these are under the age of 15, which means really that the only country that they've seen is Jordan. Unfortunately, the issue of refugees is not receiving the attention it needs to continue to receive. As an example, this year we only got 28% of the response plan that we've articulated to tackle this issue as well. And I keep telling my friends and colleagues in Europe that investing in refugees is investing in our collective security, because if we provide them with education, with dignity, with hope, then they'll be the army that will rebuild their country when conditions are conducive to that. If we abandon them to hate, bitterness, need, despair, and ignorance, then they'll be a pool from which every radical ideology would try to find recruits. So that's a challenge. I moved to Iraq. Iraq has achieved a tremendous war against Daesh and terrorism, but the war is far from over. It is imperative that we all stand by Iraq and support the current government in its efforts to stabilize Iraq, bring about tangible improvements in the lives of its people, ensure that we minimize foreign intervention, respect the sovereignty and integrity of Iraq, so that we can consolidate this victory against Daesh and also prevent a deterioration that would allow for radicals to re-emerge from within. And we do see, by the way, in Jordan, we are in the middle of it all, and unfortunately, it has been our history to be at the receiving end of every crisis in the region, with tremendous implications for our development process and our economic achievement and many others. We do see attempts by terrorist groups to re-emerge, whether in Syria and whether in Iraq, and one of the most effective tools in countering them is to ensure stability and security and achievement and improvement in people's lives. And that's why we do stress the need for all of us to stand by the Iraqi government's efforts to stabilize. On the issue of Iran, look, the Arab world, whether our brothers in Saudi, in the Emirates, in Bahrain, in Kuwait, here in Jordan, in Egypt, none of us wants conflict with Iran. What we have problem with is intervention in Arab affairs, meddling in internal Arab issues. So basically, we all want to de-escalate the situation. We do not need more conflicts in the region. And I can say very comfortably that all of us in the Arab world want to move on a path that would allow for diffusing tension and rebuild relations on the basis of non-intervention in the internal affairs, respect for the neighbors, on the basis of international law. That is a challenge, but going forward, I think as we look at what could be happening vis-a-vis relations with Iran, we must stress that the interest of the region and the needs of the region for peace and stability must be taken into consideration. Countries of the region must have a seat on the table in any future negotiations with Iran to make sure that we do address all the issues that have been preventing the achievement of real stability, and ensure that we also include all the elements that would guarantee that peace and security and stability will be a long-lasting outcome of this engagement. So we do want to engage, and we do want good relations with Iran on the basis of international law and good neighborly ties and non-intervention. In the Arab world, the truth is, we've seen many outside players playing outsized roles in our region. Part of that is our own fault. We need to be able to find mechanisms that would allow us to take more control of our own region and therefore of our future. So foreign intervention is something that we need to be dealing with. On one side, the other side, we need to come up with our own strategies and approaches that would allow us to protect our interests and contribute to the peace and stability of the region. And this applies across the board from Syria to Iraq to Yemen to other parts of the region. And one last thing I would like to add to this question, if I may, is the importance of also supporting Lebanon. Lebanon is going through tremendous difficulties and challenges at this point. And I know that there are political positions vis-a-vis the government, but I think we need to differentiate between what politics that we have towards the government and the need and the urgency of saving Lebanon and making sure that we provide the Lebanese people and Lebanon, the country, with the support they need, because we cannot afford yet another failure in the region.
Thank you, Minister. Jordan, let me follow up. Jordan, by definition, is a country open to the refugees, Palestinians, Iraqis, Syrians. No country in the world dreams to live in the neighborhoods like yours. We admire the kingdom behavior. But Jordan is an economy of 42, 43 billion. In such an unstable political environment, what kind of regional economic and social development is possible at the end of the day?
Sir, unfortunately, we're not stranger to challenges. As I said earlier, we have been at the receiving end of every crisis in this part of the world. We are the second largest per capita host of refugees anywhere in the world. And 8 years ago, if I may, before what's called the Arab Spring, our economy was growing at about 8 to 9%. Now, even before the pandemic, we're under 2%. The pandemic has had obviously tremendous challenges for our economy as well. Unemployment has gone up from about 90% to almost 24%. So we have a challenge there, but we're trying to do everything we can to maintain and ensure the resilience of our economy. We're grateful for the support of our brothers in the region and our partners in the international community that they continue to provide. And that's something that has enabled us to belittle the impact of many of those crises on us. The challenge of refugees is something that we need collective action to counter. Refugees cannot be the responsibility of host countries alone. This is a collective responsibility. Again, as we stress how grateful we are for the support that we received in enabling us to tackle this challenge, I must say that much more needs to be done. And just to give you some numbers, even though we have unemployment at about 24%, before Corona at about 19%, we've given about 176,000 work permits to Syrians. That is more than 4 times the number of jobs our economy can create on an annual basis. We provide education to every refugee that we possibly can, and we had to resort to a 2-shift program in terms of school, and sometimes 3 shifts in order to accommodate all the Syrian kids who need the education. UNRWA, we have about 2.2 registered million registered Palestinian refugees, and that's a challenge that we're also trying to face in coordination with UNRWA, because it is vital, it is imperative that UNRWA continues to deliver its service in accordance with its UN mandate until we have come up with a comprehensive solution to the Palestinian issue. So we have those challenges, and I think His Majesty has been speaking repeatedly about the need for re-globalization, to visit globalization and to see what has been the shortcomings and what is it that we can do together now to render our global system much more sensitive to the needs of people and to the changes that are happening and that are affecting us in different ways. And 2021, again, could be a challenge in terms of food security, given the disruptions to the supply chain, and that's something that His Majesty has been, again, stressing. So the way we see it is that while each and every one of our countries need to do what is important to ensure efficient economic system, to introduce whatever reforms that are needed to render our economy more able and more conducive to attracting investment and building partnership with the private sector. We do believe that given the implications and the consequences of the pandemic, global pacts need to be developed, global cooperation must be achieved, and multilateralism again must be reinforced and strengthened as the most effective tool of tackling those common challenges. And I refer to the G20 summit, which our brothers in Saudi Arabia have just hosted, and the very solid commitment that came out of there from the G20 to help smaller and medium-sized economies tackle the consequences of corona and the programs that have been set forward. So we're a country that have overcome many challenges in the past. We have the resilience of our people, we have the wisdom of our leadership, and we have the commitment to recognize problems, recognize shortcomings, and have the courage to redress them and make sure that we move forward with that. So we're doing our part. We have solid international and regional relations, and that's something that we all need to capitalize on. And again, to recognizing how interdependent our future is, how interconnected everything in our region in particular is, how important it is for all of us to be able to working together to resolve crises that have haunted and plagued our region for many years, that we work together, and because the safety of every one of us depends on the safety of all of us, and that is something to which the kingdom has always been committed and will continue to be committed to.
Thank you, Minister. One last question, because we are running out of time. Earlier you mentioned terrorism. How big a threat is terrorism for Jordan and the region more broadly? And how can your country cooperate with European countries to address this problem?
Thank you. We have been at the forefront of efforts to fight terrorism on all fronts. Terrorism remains a very potent threat to all of us, as I said. Radical thinking, extremism thrives on, again, chaos, on conflicts, on people's need and despair. So we need to address that. We are part of the global coalition against Daesh. We are part of every regional and international mechanism that is there to counter terrorism. So I think when terrorism remains a threat, again, terrorists have killed, by the way, more Muslims and more Arabs, and have caused more damage in the region than they did anywhere else, because they're up against us. So the war on terror is our collective war. It is a war to which Jordan is unwaveringly committed. And we believe we need to find terrorism on a number of fronts. On the battleground, and we've seen the Daesh no longer maintaining territorial control. So the military threat is much less now than it was a few years ago. And this is greatly due to the work of the global coalition against Daesh and to the sacrifices of our brothers in Iraq as well. The security threat remains a potent threat, because Daesh now is regrouping and probably adjusting its ways of inflicting damage and pain on all of us. The social media, the virtual world is a world where they're trying to recruit and organize and coordinate operations. So we need to be very vigilant about that. Number three, we need to, again, solve crises and conflicts that have enabled them to spread their agenda and ideology of hate and recruit people and benefit from the lack of law and order. So resolving regional conflict is something very important. Number four, we need to create hope and opportunity for our youth, because terrorists, again, they prey on despair. So economic development, social development, human rights, political horizons are all key components of our ability to shield our youth from being poisoned by those ideologies of hate across the front. And number four, we need to make sure that we win the ideological war. And that is going to take efforts from all of us. In the region, we continue to challenge their claim to representing Islam because they have nothing to do with Islam. His Majesty speaks of them as Khawarij, which means the outlaws of Islam. They are takfiris who are against everybody who does not agree with them. So that is our fight here, is to make sure that we expose the fact that they have nothing to do not just with Islam but with our common humanity as well. And again, we cannot globally fall into the trap that terrorists want us to fall into, which is trying to present this war as a war between the West and East, between Islam and others. It is not. It's a war between all of us who do not agree with their ideology of hate and them. So we have to be careful not to give them any traction in propagating their agenda that this is a war between Islam and the rest of the world. No, it is a war that Islam and the rest of the world have against them because they have nothing to do with Islam. The terminology is very important. We cannot continue to speak of Islamist terror or whatever. We have to be clear. These are takfiris, these are outlaws. So making sure that we building that bridges of coordination and cooperation, addressing Muslim communities in Europe, making sure that they are getting the right teachings of Islam. And that's why the kingdom has always been there, offering all the support that we can give in terms of training of imams and making sure that the true spirit of Islam and the true values of Islam are understood by Muslims everywhere. And as you know, His Majesty has launched the Aqaba process many years ago as a forum which would pool all our efforts to work collectively against terrorist groups wherever they are. And unless we have that comprehensive approach that the Aqaba process embodies, we will not be able to get the success that we want. Because truth is, if you get Daesh in Syria, you don't get them in Iraq, they're going to move to Iraq. You get them in Iraq and Syria, and you do not deprive them a safe haven in Libya, they're going to go to Libya. Don't get them in Libya, they're going to go to Africa. So it is a collective effort. We have to have a comprehensive, holistic approach to fighting terrorism, holistic geographically, and also holistic in terms of the fronts on which we need to battle them. And that's something that we in Jordan have been trying to ensure that we, with all our friends, moving within. And again, Libya is another story where we're optimistic by the progress that's being achieved with different forums to solve the conflict there. And we have to say that one of our concerns is that we need to stop foreign intervention in Libya. We need to stabilize Libya because we do not want Libya to lose law and order and to become, to fall into the abyss of lawlessness so that Daesh and Al-Qaeda and other radicals would use that to rebuild and regroup. And if they are in Libya, the danger is they will hook up to Africa, they will hook up across the Mediterranean and cause challenges in Europe. So that is a file that we also need to be looking at very carefully.
Well, thank you so much, Minister, for joining us this afternoon.
Thank you so much.
Good afternoon.
Thank you.
It's a pleasure to be with you. And again, my gratitude to our colleagues in the Italian Foreign Ministry and the Institute and for you all for making this possible. Thank you so much.
Shukran, ma salama.
Shukran.